Welcome, everybody. Hello, I'm Winifred Dejani, the chair of the Wetlands Committee at the Point San Pedro Road Coalition. And I welcome you to tonight's presentation, Nature-Based Solutions for Local Eroding Shorelines. The coalition is a 501c nonprofit volunteer-run organization whose mission is to represent the interests of the residents and the neighborhood associations along the Point San Pedro corridor in East San Rafael. And to that end, we have varied committees such as the Wetlands Committee, the Disaster Prep Committee, Roadway Committee, and others, and they all work hard on local issues. We also engage the community in other ways. For example, this past Monday, we co-hosted a candidates forum for the upcoming elections. And so you can find out more about all the good work we do if you just go to our website at sprcoalition.org. You can sign up for our email list, learn more about our committees, join one if you're interested. We're always looking to grow our volunteer corps. It's really an important part of doing what we do. And we are also having our biannual community meeting on November 2nd coming up. So mark that on your calendar as well. And it's going to be in person at the San Pedro Elementary School. So before we start our presentation, there's just a few housekeeping items I want to mention. This program will be recorded and will be available within the next few days on our YouTube channel. You can go to our YouTube channel just by going on YouTube, or if you go to our website, the homepage, on the menu bar, there's a tab that says our YouTube channel. So you can click there, you can have access to all the recordings of previous events, both Wetlands Committee and other events that we've recorded. It will be closed caption, so if you want that option, you could show or hide the closed caption as you like. After Roger Leventhal's presentation, there will be a question and answer session. So you can either type your questions in the chat and we'll go through them then, or if you want, you can just raise your hand and then we'll call on people in turn and unmute you if you want to ask your questions directly to Rogers. And then finally, the Point San Pedro Road Coalition is completely community funded, so we appreciate any donations if you're able or willing to give donations. You can also do that on our homepage on the website. There's a donate tab on the menu bar as well. And so I'm going to move into the program. Tonight, the Wetlands Committee is very pleased to have Roger Leventhal to talk about nature-based solutions for local eroding shorelines. Roger is a senior engineer with Marin County Flood Control District, and he has vast experience in this area. Just to summarize some of his experience, he oversees technical studies for sea level rise and climate change adaptation for Marin County, with an emphasis on using nature-based solutions and their integration with more traditional engineering approaches. He's designed and managed several very large Bay Area tidal marsh restoration projects, especially those involving reuse of dredge sediments to create wetlands, including the Novato Thin Lift Dredge Placement Projects, the Montezuma Wetlands Project, and the Hamilton Restoration Project. And then also as a consultant, Roger was lead engineering designer for the Aramburo Bay Beach Restoration Project in Marin County, and he is currently developing additional beach restoration projects at several locations in southern Marin. So we're very excited to have Roger with us tonight to share this immense expertise. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to him.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to pull up the presentation. Hopefully this all goes well. Oh, do I have to share my screen? Is that or do I have yeah, share screen. There we go. I should know this by now. So let me know if you can see it. Can you see my screen?
Yes,
I'll take that as a yes. So thanks for having me. That we're going to talk. I'm going to talk tonight and focus on one type of living shoreline design that we've been working on hard in Marin, and that's the idea of recreating or engineering bay beaches, really as an alternative to riprap and walls for eroding shorelines. So I'll give plenty of examples. This could be a really long talk. I'm going to try to keep it to about 30 minutes ish. So we're just going to kind of touch upon examples, and then there'll be questions, and we can kind of see what's being done around the bay and give people an idea of what could be done. And then at the very end, if there's, well, let me show you the agenda. So we'll talk about sort of Marin and why public works, why where I work sort of cares about these issues. And then some examples of bay beaches. There hasn't been that many built. So I'm going to just show a few of them, really most, but not that many, but most of the ones I'm going to show you examples of projects. And then, as Winifred said, a design project that I've just finished up down in looking at 3 sites in southern Marin, and then the Greenwood Beach that we're now funded to go to construction. So I'll show you kind of examples of all these. And then if there's time at the very end I think there's 2 short video clips, kind of like almost your moment of Zen, with just, you can watch waves on a hard shoreline and on a sort of gravelly beach shoreline. And that might actually demonstrate better than all these other slides, the ability of beaches to dampen wave energy and dampen shoreline erosion. So just going to jump right into it. So Marin County, probably not telling you people anything, but Marin is very low elevation. I don't know if you can see my cursor. I never know when that shows up or not. Yeah, okay, good. So that blue line is the current shoreline. And then this is, I think, with the 48 inches or something of sea level rise. Right now, this little screen is blocking it, but what the exact number is. But essentially shows what I think we all know. Marin is a very hilly county with a very thin, low-lying elevation along its eastern shoreline. I think we're the most vulnerable of the 9 Bay Area counties to sea level rise. Maybe we have a little debate going with San Mateo for the dubious honor of who is the most vulnerable, but I would put us as number 1, maybe more accurately, most existentially vulnerable. So you can just see the blue is what a little bit of sea level rise does. So, and we have like the highest capital roads. But another thing we have, which is really great for this talk, is we have the best array of natural shorelines of any county. So we are the best natural laboratory to try out living shoreline type projects, because we have everything from headlands, coastal thing. We have swell, which doesn't extend much past Marin and San Francisco. Anyone who is a boater in the audience knows what I'm talking about. And then we extend all the way up to more of the alluvial fans of Novato. And so we just have it all. And then we have flooding, of course. Wouldn't be a flood. I couldn't do a talk without showing a few flood slides. And this is the famous Manzanita or Miller Avenue in Mill Valley. This is just high tide flooding, sunny day. You don't see this kind of flooding in many, many places around the bay. But another aspect of sea level rise that we're really going to talk about now is the wave energy and wave erosion, and what it's done to our shorelines, and how it's going to increase if there's ferries, create boat wakes that do a lot of sort of short period, very sharp edged waves that if you've ever kayaked like I do, you really feel them on the boats, and how that's impacted the Marin shoreline. And there's just examples all around San Francisco Bay, and there's a lot of sort of non-engineered. We're going to show more slides like this. This is like Greenwood Beach and Tiburon to a T, the sort of haphazard placement of concrete and asphalt. Back in the day, they would just put anything along the shoreline. We have that. We also have, this is Paradise Beach, one of our 3 design sites in southern Marin, and you see, I'll show more of Paradise, how that's really eroding away. And in fact, the whole hillside is in danger of collapse. It's quite dramatic, actually. And that you can see in the background there is some wrap, which is what they've done to try to just keep the water off it. It's a very sort of ad hoc approach. And then a lot of people don't know that the number 1 way that we lose tidal marsh is not really from overtopping. It's from that wave shoreline edge erosion and fault slop block slumping, where the waves erode and the marsh kind of falls down and then it erodes away. So there's a lot of examples. This is all Mill Valley. I sort of annotated it here, but you can see the scarped shoreline wave eroded. So it's a major cause of loss of marsh. This is the Corte Madera Ecological Reserve down in Corte Madera, of course. And we've lost, I think it's over 100, 150 feet. These are meters here of of shoreline edge, and you just see this is a current. And at one point, it varies on its rate year by year. It's not a uniform thing. On a big water erosion year, you will lose up to 2 meters, then maybe less the next year. But on average, since they've been measuring it, it's been about 2 meters, up to 2 meters per year. So it just gives you an idea that all around the shoreline in Marin and beyond, we have these eroding shorelines. And then what people have been doing is a combination of engineered riprap and just sort of non-engineered slag fill. And there's another view of Paradise, and you can see where they took a lot of the old Navy. These used to be what they anchored submarine nets for in World War II. And somebody took and they sort of laid them along, but nature has a way of taking advantage, and it went over the top and eroded away the shoreline behind this big heavy concrete blocks. And all this is out there. You can go out there today and walk on these actually. And people do, they'll walk all the way down to that little pocket beach right down there in the foreground or background of Paradise Beach on Tiburon. So nature has a way of just kind of, especially waves, water is very powerful and has a way of working behind these situations. So with sea level on the rise, and we're in sort of maybe a sediment deficit situation. This is a nice shot of China Camp. What are we going to do to protect our shorelines and maintain our marshes under, now we're in changing conditions with sea level rise and sediment too. So we have both things going on. So we pause and we say, okay, what do we want for a shoreline future? Here we are, citizens of Marin. And do we want it to be kind of all rocked and armored like this with a loss of habitat really, and uniform sort of look, and very rigid armored, and not a living shoreline, an armored shoreline. Walls, this is also San Rafael, I believe. Took this photo years ago where somebody put in a sheet pile wall. That's what this is called, where they nail sheet piles down as sort of a seawall. This gets pounded. There's probably 2/3 in the ground versus 1/3 sticking up. The general rule of design for sheet pile. And this, or then show a San Quentin shoreline here with a rock and the wall. And this is the point where I maybe nod out to all the liberal arts, literary studies majors, and point out that we have people in behind bars here, and we have sort of the shoreline behind bars, kind of a little metaphysical moment. But showing that this is kind of what we're doing to our shoreline all around the bay, but certainly Marin County has this. So tonight I'm going to show some examples of beaches as an alternative to riprap, where you have the room. And even though I sound sure, this is a living shoreline type where we're still learning. We haven't done enough of these, as I'll talk about, to know if they're, where maybe the limits of them are, but this is and I'm going to show more on this Heron's Head Park. This is the most recent one built in San Francisco, a project that I did when I worked at a consulting firm, Levine and Fricke, back in the 90s. We did the wetlands restoration. And at that point, the port didn't want us to armor. We didn't want to armor the shoreline. They wanted to go more low budget, but now since then, with wave energy and sea level rise, that this trail that at that time they said, we'll just let it wash away. Now they have to protect it. People have grown up to love the park, and so now they're looking at a natural way. So they just built this a couple years ago. So we'll circle back on this one. Let's just also take a step back too and say that beaches are a natural part of the Bay Area. If you know anything about Golden Gate Park, you know that it was all sand dunes. So San Francisco was made up of pocket beaches. Marin, a lot of pocket beaches, as I'll talk about, show examples of coming up. I had to eliminate the parts of the talk that was almost like an atlas of existing Bay beaches, or would have been here for another hour. But there's an interesting, a tour one could do, maybe a future talk of sort of the Bay beach types all around San Francisco Bay, and a lot of sand and pocket beaches down in the South Bay. Oyster shells play a bigger part. And the ones at Point Pinole are, that's the best we have sand. Our best examples of gravelly beaches up at Point Pinole Park. So it's a natural type that was historic to the Bay, but a lot of it got lost as we developed. So SFEI, I've been working on this with, I think Stewart's on the call, so I'm going to evoke his name a few times. We did Arambaroo years ago, but in 2019, SFEI, the Estuary Institute, put out this adaptation atlas looking at all sorts of different things one could do. Obviously, it's very green based, but gives us some idea. And beaches were called out as a natural shoreline type. They used our photos from Arambaroo as their sort of type solution. And they talked about how gravel, cobble, sand. So this is now a pretty identified restoration type, certainly where you have the room. And that all the benefits to nature, all the birds especially, oyster catchers. Turns out there was a whole bunch of birds just sort of waiting to drop out of the sky whenever we managed to build some sand gravel habitat. And as I'll show you at Arambaroo, they kind of just came almost the next day, it felt like, and started inhabiting it. So it's a necessary and beneficial habitat for the critters. Part of the adaptation atlas was these operational landscape units, OLU, and I think this is a very simplistic look. I'm not the hugest fan of this, but I think it does help. I do really love how it sort of divides up the bay into discrete units that would be a good way to think of adaptation. And the San Rafael OLU, which is in the report, identified a lot of sort of beach habitat as possible to be built. They were very careful to say it's not a design document, it's just sort of a 30,000 foot planning document. But here we are looking at the design level. So first, Heron's Head Park, and thanks to ESA Associates, who I work with a lot. We hired them a lot in Marin, and they did the Heron's Head Park beach. The original tidal marsh, like I said, was done by actually one of my projects back in the 90s. And they built, since then, they built this ecological center. This is all new. It was kind of a desolate part of San Francisco Port back when I worked on it, but not anymore. And they built the beach along the edge. And they used sort of this living shoreline compendium, which I'm going to come back to show where the sort of beaches are, the sort of coarse grain beach fronting the wetlands that are behind it, and nature-based approach, ecological function. This is their side, and so they had some requirements from the Port of San Francisco that I think things are maybe built a little bigger than I would, but the port didn't want to have to do any maintenance. They didn't want anything to move, and if it doesn't move, then you're on the riprap spectrum. And if it's a beach, it's supposed to move. Maybe that's really the just one sentence difference, is that we want to work with a system that self-organizes. So they just built it a couple of years ago. They're starting their 10-year monitoring cycle. We're just finishing it at Arambaroo. I'll show you next. And this is how it looked upon completion. They're a couple of years into it with the beach and the driftwood, which is great. That's a really great addition you find on these sort of natural gravel beaches. They also did a reef ball, something I have not had experience with. Decided to kind of do that offshore oyster habitat. So it's a complete system. These slides, I think, PDFs will be there, and Eddie DeVitas, the project manager, and he can answer more direct questions. I was on the TAC, or their technical advisory group, so I had some input here and there. And I and Peter Bay, who we'll talk about coming up, we're on the TWIG technical group. So this one's done. So I want to talk about Arambaroo. Some of you have seen these slides before. This was led by Stewart. He was the prime, and I was his engineer, sort of backing him up. Arambaroo is in outer Richardson Bay. It's that kind of backwards looking wrench. It's an artificial island built from them when they scraped off the hills in order to build homes on Strawberry Point Peninsula. They dumped a bunch of this, and they intended to build a bunch more homes. And in fact, they do have homes right here in the lower. This is Arambaroo Island proper. But they put a bunch of muck here, and then SEAL started using it. And that's right around, I think, when BCDC kind of started stopping people from developing ecologically sensitive areas. So it stayed undeveloped, but it kept eroding, 73, 79 feet of erosion over the time. And it had that kind of look that you've seen from the other photos. So, 1 meter, 3 foot, 3 or 4 foot scarp. These are roots sticking out, kind of that wave erosion that we've seen. And then the rock that was in the fill. This is a fill from Strawberry Peninsula, when they built the homes, had rocks and such in it, and the rocks fell out and became sort of lag armor a little bit, a little too big to move. Some of them, some did move a little, but it was unengineered and it just kind of kept eroding away. So lucky for us, bad for the birds. If you remember the Costco Buscan oil spill back in 2007, a bunch of oil went up on the island and oiled some birds, and that led to about $1 million settlement that Marin Audubon managed for Marin Parks. And that helped, that basically paid. So it was really us, Stuart Leading, who approached Marin Parks and said, hey, Stuart and Peter really, and said, look, we could do something new. This would be a good spot for a living shoreline beach as a pilot project, because it wasn't on the radar back then. This is the first one in San Francisco Bay. And one interesting thing about Aramburu is in some ways it's one of the harder places to do a beach because of the wave energy is so oblique. Ideally, the waves are normal, perpendicular to the shoreline, and that sort of keeps the sediments on the beach. But Aramburu is really oblique, a really high incident wave energy angle. So there's a lot of engineering in this. I'm not talking about any of that tonight. I'd love to another time. But to the engineering approach in the audience, that kind of fetch is big, significant wave heights are big, and the shorter term waves have their own characteristics. So, and this has been borne out through the 10 years of monitoring. It just got done last year, I think, the report that we've definitely seen a movement of sediment. So this is the pre-construction. I was still a consultant then. I got a job with the county shortly thereafter, maybe partly due to this project a little bit. So that was great. Also, I was turning 50 or something. So the idea of having a real job at that point, I had a young kid, seemed like a nice jump. So that's why I came to the county and have been able to do this kind of work with a different hat. So Aramburu kind of neatly divides. We did it in 3 cells: coarser sediment at the higher wave energy to the south. Sorry, this is to the north this way. Less wave energy to the north, so we used more oyster shell and mixed sand and gravel in the middle. We built little groins, this little natural groins, not the big Army Corps ones, called them micro groins, added wood. There are a lot of lessons learned on this project, which I won't go into because time is moving here. But we did this as a true pilot, I think, 3 different cells, 3 different treatments, and we've been monitoring closely. So ever since then, to try to learn and then disseminate the knowledge learned from this. We use different types of material, some from San Francisco Bay, the gravel, some larger stuff that does not exist in San Francisco Bay. We had to go up to a Russian River watershed to get the coarser, the rounder. Because when you're doing beaches, you want rounder stuff because you want it to move. The last thing you want is that, well, especially you guys would appreciate this. The last thing we want is that quarry stuff that Dutra puts out, because that's what you do when you want angular stuff that won't move. That's why you do quarry rock, that big hole next to you where a lot of you guys live. We didn't want that. We want the more natural looking sands and gravels. So on the construction, show a few slides. This is us grading out the scarp, placing the oyster shell hash, and letting the waves work it. What's great about beaches is the forces of nature do a lot of the work. And then we put these little wooden, called the micro groins. This is maybe one lesson learned, is they were supposed to be extended by a Audubon or Parks further out, and they weren't, which is has been a problem where we've seen some bypassing of the groins with sediment. And then we constructed a sandy foreshore. Beaches are a system: sandy foreshore, gravelly back berm, and then we then have some. This is post-construction. Wow, over 10 years ago. Boy, time goes. Post-construction of the beach. Now you have more of a textbook-looking beach. This is one of the first storms in February 2013. You can see it still looks great. Still, there's been some reworking of the sediment. A big storm in March or April of 2013, and just a beautiful textbook-looking beach system. And then another one. And then the 10-year report has many other photos since then, but I wasn't able to update this talk. I should for the next one. And the birds, like I said, practically fell out of the sky. These are cool. They have orange beaks, oyster catchers. They skim the water. Very fun to watch. Terns, plovers. And then Audubon's been monitoring birds ever since then, and bird usage has really gone up a lot. I have to get the latest data, but it's been, I think, ecologically a big success. Maybe some close-up shots, and we even they have their own Facebook page, which is a Bay Sanctuary, have their own thing about birds. So, and yeah, so this 10 years ago, the oyster catchers came back. So I want to talk a few quick slides about Sears Point. This is a project, again, really, I was working for Stewart as a sub, and it's up in North San Pablo Bay. It's a 940-acre tidal marsh restoration, breached in 2015, managed by the Sonoma Land Trust and the Fish and Wildlife Service. So what people really do, and what we did, is, we try to build these ecotone levees, but they're big levees. So we and everyone else, we try to build them out of the local borrow, which is a lot of the times muck, and it's unengineered, muck. So the core of the levee is great. This is a flood levee, but the ecotone part was built out of soft because it saves money. It's local. We can't truck everything in. I mean, the greenhouse gases and such. So, so we did whatever people are doing. It's built it out of muck. But what happens is, years later, the muck starts eroding, and we get this sort of scarping pattern again, and we've lost a lot of the ecotone levee. So the Land Trust was looking around, wondering what to do. And another environmental group who does a lot of restoration proposed riprapping the whole thing. I won't say their name, although it was a really bad idea. And they're a group that does a lot of wetlands design. But we, as in really Stuart and Peter, approached the Land Trust and said, look, we can do, I think, a lower, more natural approach to hardening of it. So again, I was sort of helping with the engineering, and it's not a full beach restoration. It's a combination of plantings, pickleweed, saltgrass, logs, a lot of logs. I'll show you one photo here. But there's a gravel berm beach part of it that I think has been very critical to making this thing so far work so well. And decided to add taking some bay mud and allow that to move along with regrading. But their logs and the wood, which are integral components to our beach design, we did up here along this, probably 1,000 something feet of eroding levee in the main basin of Sears Point. So again, the site was breached with these inlets. This is all now water. It's quite beautiful, actually. You should go up there and you can walk along this trail. But it was that ecotone levee on the trail that faced this wave energy that was eroding. That's this guy right here. So rather than riprap it, as proposed by some other groups, we went in for this treatment. And a lot of it, I'm just going to do this quick. This could be a long talk. This is a gravel tow berm, a lot of logs. You can see up and down the shoreline. You can see them out there today, although a lot of them have been covered up by the success of the revegetation. And to the natural combination system approach to breaking and dampening the wave energy. So far, so good. This is after construction. And then if you go to just this last November, a year ago, the vegetation's come back with a crazy great. I mean, really wonderful to watch it. Re-vegged it, I think so far, it's been a success. It's been through a series of big storms. And so far, it seems topographically stable. I think the logs have done, along with the gravel and the other elements, have allowed the vegetation to recolonize and reestablish a natural system without rock. Will it work everywhere? Don't know, but it seems to be working here. And then finally got him at 24 minutes already, so I'm going to keep going. So much to talk about. I need a long time. In 2019, I got a grant from Marin Community Foundation and the Conservancy to look at 3 sites in southern Marin. And I'll show you examples. And we tried to pick 3 sites that each demonstrated a different problem. So let's do one by one. So Paradise Park, actively eroding site. You can go down there today or tomorrow. You can see all the blocks, and you can see the shoreline basically falling apart, eroding like crazy. And the whole slope is in danger of failing. I've been trying to get parks to let me apply for a grant to see if we could help stabilize this with the beach. But we did designs. I'll show you the report here in a second. But it's a pretty striking site of an actively failing shoreline. And then I think the watering probably doesn't help, adds water into the slope. But this is definitely being undercut from the wave action. There is eelgrass here too, which is a great thing ecologically, but Not so great when you have a lot of sediment eroding into the eelgrass, which likes a very uh, as little turbidity in the water as possible. This is just another more panned out view of the shoreline. There's a little pocket beach right here. Maybe it's a hint. Nature's telling us that, hey, maybe we could connect this up and a beach system could actually work here. So, I mean, if you just look over here, it's nice. Here, there's higher wave energy, of course, because of the reflective nature of some of these rocks and piers are actually doing damage. Seminary Drive, no one even knows this exists, but it's off of Seminary Avenue, heading out to Tiburon. There's somebody stopped the riprap here and then let it go. So over time, it's continued to erode. So it's kind of an example of just a kind of an eroding away shoreline that affects DPW everywhere, where, could we do something in sort of a tight area, a narrow area? So that was the design problem for this site, instituting a beach design in a sort of narrow area off of a road, off of a critical infrastructure. The road's not moving. Can we do something in this sort of tight space? That was the point of this one. And then finally, Greenwood Beach, which is Blackie's Pasture Park, a pretty eroding shoreline. I'll show you a picture here. And so it's next to a sort of a flood channel. So there's a sediment source, but the shoreline kind of looks like this. You've probably seen now, getting used to this idea that they're everywhere. Eroded shoreline, and this one actually had no road or something. So there's a lot of asphalt leaching into the bay. So this one, we've done a design. So I want to say that for this one, there's actually two design approaches. So I'm not doing a talk on design approaches, but I did want to spend 1 minute and just say that one we looked at from this guy, Mark Larong, who's written a lot of papers, is to break the waves offshore. I think it might be more appropriate for higher energy environments, higher wave energy environments, but break the waves there and dissipate so the wave energy is not here. We called it a perch dynamic gravel beach. The other one, and so there's a lot of math and physics in this somewhat that went into the design, and Mark's very proud of this, and I agree with him. This appeals to me as the engineer, and I think there are sort of higher wave energy environments where this might be the solution. For Greenwood, we went with something more championed by Peter and myself, actually, but really led by Peter, the idea of nourishing the beach, building, again, it's sort of the Aramburu approach where you build retention, but because the wave energy is very much shore normal, we're building we're bringing in sand and gravel and building some sills, drift sills to stop the movement, but sort of rebuilding it by more renourishing the beach. It might require renourishing. So that's the approach, and I'm happy to say that this was funded just a month or two ago. We'll be building it next summer, if all goes well. CEQA just got done like a week ago, and we hope to go to construction next summer. All this is in a report that's online, or you can send me an email. The three approaches, it's a big report, has a lot more details, but you can get it there. And so finally, I'm going to be 5 minutes over, but I think I'm okay. I wanted to talk about design with nature and grants and kind of where we are in this business right now, because we are in the middle of it, or the early middle, maybe the late beginning of this idea of design with nature. And if you hang around the grant world now, as you guys are or will, everything is designed with nature. And what does that mean? Well, it's up for grabs a little. And like any new thing, it's subject to a lot of controversy, or I hate to use the word greenwashing, but I think it is applicable a little bit, where people use the words, but maybe don't always use them. Or there's a wide range of things that people might call design with nature. So, and then of course you can put it onto this scale where there's conventional engineering, the walls and rock. And then there's things like I've done sometimes where you put a little green in front, hybrid things. And then all the way to a natural system. So where are these? So I was going to do a little mild quiz and say, where's this in the spectrum? This is the India Basin design in San Francisco. It's got everything. This is what happens, and I'm not criticizing the design. It's a very urban area, a very important, economically, culturally disadvantaged area. But this is a little designed by committee, right? You've got everything, a boat and bocce ball courts, and then they floating deck and you put a beach kind of here. So is this really a natural system? I think this is maybe more of a landscape feature than a natural beach, but everyone gets to decide for themselves. Next to the basketball courts, a beach here. This is one they built up in Washington. Is it really a natural beach? I guess it has more elements of it. They got the gravel and they got the wood. It's kind of off of a park, it's got groins. So, yeah, I guess so, if you squint. Natural or maybe more nature inspired. Not really for me to say where they falls on the spectrum, but I think to me, that's maybe more of a hybrid or a green gray. And then you compare it to a Ramburu again, which I think is more as a fully, sort of natural system. So I point that out to say, in order to get grant nowadays, you kind of have to have that nature-based component for most all grants. FEMA, the Army Corps, they've really changing. They're putting it everywhere, even when I think they don't even understand what it is or what it means. So to the extent that we can work with you or you can incorporate features like this, it's going to really help your chances. So just a little side note on that. And I think, I wanted to show two, if I have time, two short videos. I think I may have a minute here. And I say this will be like, this might just give more information than all the others. So this is a hard shoreline, non-thing. And you can just see the chaotic way that the waves reflect the wave energy. I think Alan's a physicist or something, he said, so probably can appreciate the sort of wave energy, it just reflects. It's a very reflective beach. When people put in walls, there's a thing called the wall effect, where at the end of the wall, the erosion is worse because that wave energy, it's not gone, it just erodes, it just is reflected. So now we go to what happens if you put a little gravel berm beach there. Oh, is this the hard type? Oh, sorry, wrong one. So you can see that one again. So let me find the beach one. Yeah, sorry. This is a dissipative gravel beach. And you can see that the wave energy, so infiltration, if you study beaches like I did, or get there, you see that the role of infiltration is very important. And as you go walk on the beach yourself, you can just see that as the waves come in and out, that how it sort of really works to damp the waves. So with that, I think that is it. Yeah, and I can stop sharing. And just say, I think I'm at 33 minutes or so. So hopefully that's not too bad.
Well, thank you, Roger. That was very, very interesting. And we weren't going to hold you to 33 minutes, though.
Well, I have a tendency to go on, so
Yeah.
I tried to rein myself in. But also, I know Stuart's here. He can help answer questions if there's things that.
Okay, well, I'm going to open it up to questions now. You can either type your questions in the chat, or if you want to ask Roger a question in person, you could just you raise your hand, and we'll call on you and unmute you. I know I have some questions.
I should say by raise hand means to click on the raise hand icon at the bottom.
Thank you, Alan. Yes, click on the raised hand icon on the bottom of your screen, and then a hand will appear on your screen, and then we'll know that you want to ask a question, and we'll unmute you. But I do have a question, so I'm going to start it off because I'm very interested in the gravel beaches, I understand how they mitigate the energy of the wave, but I don't understand how that gravel stays there.
Oh, well, that's again, it depends on the wave environment. So that's a good question. Gravel typically ends up being higher in the wave zone; it gets pushed up. But that's the point of the groins. The sand, the retention features, also. But we haven't had so much problem with that at Ramburu. It's been more the sand that is more mobile, that has bypassed the groins. The gravel, I think I could go back in a few photos, but we tend to get in bay beaches. So bay beaches are different than outer coast beaches. You tend to have muddy feet, the bay mud, go into a sand foreshore, and tends to be it ranges, but often a very fine sand, not a coarse grain, not a shoaling sand like you might put out at a recreation beach. and then the gravel forms these sort of high back berms when the wave energy pushes it up, and that tends to be where it stays. At least even at Aramburu, it didn't move too much. I think more the sand and the oyster shell is very light. That stuff like got pushed way up into the because it's very buoyant.
Okay.
But I will say that just to be honest, like I don't, as an engineer, know, are there limits to where this will work, or maybe the gravel needs to be then cobbles, and there hasn't been a really good connection of wave energy, wave climate, and size in the system. So that's something we're working and thinking about. As part of the grant I have now, we're doing we did a bunch of surveys at a bunch of beaches around the North Bay and Central Bay, and we're going to make that data available to other consultants. That's one of the deliverables, because we want to get this information out there so that more people than us in ESA are doing it. And I say there's kind of the Wild West, like people can say they're doing beach design even when they're doing things that are just not really, I think, fit the bill. So, but they call it that. So, hope that helps.
Kate Powers has a question.
Thank you. Hi, Roger.
Yeah.
I was wondering, when you did the 10-year monitoring with Arambu, I'm wondering if any monitoring is going on to see how the shoreline on either side. I know that Arambu is an island, but BCDC is doing this coordinated shoreline adaptation planning. And I'm just interested in how these adaptation projects what we might learn about how a natural approach in one area might impact sea level rise in nearby areas.
So we didn't monitor impacts to waves off of the island or anything, but I don't think there would be an impact. There was some concern because they dredged the inner part of that channel.
Yeah.
Next to the so we were concerned that some of that material might get into the dredged channel, but that hasn't. It seems to have gone to the north of the island and then stabilized as actually even new marsh area. The idea of wave of shoreline treatment impacting water levels around the bay, that's a topic. That's a really big topic, probably for another time, another talk. But there was a lot of concern, but some recent modeling work has shown that that's less of a concern. But that's more about like if everybody armored their shoreline.
Yeah.
What that would do to water levels. But that's been shown recently by Deltaris, the big company, to be not so much of a concern. But we aren't doing a monitoring, a summary of the, too much of the adjacent properties beyond where the sediment went.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to call in order. Bonnie Mamore and then Kate Hageman in that order. Have a question?
Might be on mute.
Thank you, Roger, for this great presentation. Sorry. I am wondering, how can people request that a specific area be surveyed to determine if it's a good candidate for nature-based adaptation? For example, the cove along Point San Pedro Road that was featured in the flyer for this presentation. So that is just west of the McNair's Brickyard. And it looks very similar to some of the beaches that we're seeing in your presentation, with riprap and that's deteriorating. And it seems like it would be a good candidate to the untrained eye. And I have heard that it might be from people who ought to know. So how would a community not only request or advocate for an area to be surveyed, but also to try and get maybe some grant money going to study it? Can you give us some input on that?
Well, I think we have Kate here. Were you in a flood zone where I work? One could always.
We are in the flood zone. It is.
Well, you're in a flood zone. You're not. Sorry, in the one of the 5 or 6 flood zones for the county that I work at. Sometimes people go to the board and request funding. I'm sure San Rafael has their equivalent. I think that would be a good candidate. I didn't bring that up, but I think, the very large riprap, I've been out there. Whoever designed that, I think, definitely was big rock. It's my memory anyway. So there's a lot of voids that I think gravel could really help backfill. We had thought about doing that at near Blackie's pasture, because if you keep going down the Tiburon Linear Park, you see a lot of that rock we were going to sort of fill in. It would have been a good experiment, but for funding, we had to take that out. But as a request, you could just ask people. Obviously Stuart's here, and Kate could talk about it. I'm happy to go out and take a look, and then you just have to start applying for grants. I can certainly help you. Talk to you about the available ones. There are not that many, and start making the case for grant funding. I don't have any specific formula. I have to go get grants myself. So this is not the flood district. This does not look like flood control to the people that I work for, because it's not really traditional. So I do have some time. I could donate, but
Right.
But typically, like, to do any project, I write grants just like everybody else.
Right. And we have had flooding over that riprap. That has been the area.
In some ways, it would be a great test case, because you told me the road does flood. You mentioned that in our pre-call.
Yeah. So Kate Hageman just shared something with me, which I will share with everyone. It is a link to a survey. So thank you, Kate Hageman. I think she wanted to ask you a question too. And Kate, I think it would be nice for those who don't know who Kate is. Either Kate, Winifred, do you want to introduce her? Or?
Yeah, I am going to introduce Kate. Before I do, Stuart Siegel had some answers to your question, Bonnie. So he's asked to be unmuted. And...
Thanks so much, Winifred. So one thing Roger and I've dealt with for many, many years in grants that's really critical is there's variability, but fundamentally having landowners be part of the process in some fashion, either saying it's okay to look at my property or I'm a partner in some fashion. We do this all the time, and oftentimes we work with Audubon Center, Marin County Parks, or one of the land trusts. It's on lands they already own, so they oftentimes are the applicant. In the case of Brickyard Cove, that whole section along Point San Pedro Road, the bay is private land, and so that private landowner has to be on board to have any studies done of that involve their property. So that's kind of, and the same thing with Spinnaker Lagoon. That also happened there years ago. Is who owns the land? They have to be on board for going to get grants to do work.
Thank you, Stuart. And now Kate Hageman does have a question. Introduce her. She is the Climate Adaptation and Resilience Planner of the City of San Rafael, and she's doing a lot on sea level rise, adaptation, and projects involved with that. So, Alan, can you unmute her?
All right, can you hear me? Yeah.
Okay, yes, Kate. Welcome.
Yeah, this was so great. Thank you, guys. I learned a lot. And yeah, and Bonnie, to your point, I think if it's okay, folks want to, if you're local, share your requests of what you would like to see studied or what you'd like to see move forward through that survey that we have online. Because right now we do have an open planning project that includes this area. So sharing your ideas, places, specifics and places where you'd like to see things happen is super helpful for the team that's working on it. So that's there as a resource. But I was going to ask Roger and Stuart as well, thinking about like the code was an example where you have perhaps a little bit of a trade-off between subaquatic habitats that are there, like mudflat, and perhaps building out into them. I was just wondering how, with other projects, has that balance kind of been weighed, or is it in an area like okay, it's already degraded, we can already tell there's not a big trade-off here? I was just curious, like for the Point San Pedro Road example, you probably need to be working in the water, and perhaps there would be some change to what's there. But Yeah, just wondering your thoughts on that.
I mean, I can start, and Stuart can probably chime in. So at Greenwood, yeah, I mean, it does come up. There was concern over conversion of mudflat habitat. I mean, actually, there's so much mudflat out there. To me, it seems shouldn't be a concern. But you know, the regulatory environment in San Francisco Bay might be one of the toughest in the country. I mean, so just flat out say that it's very difficult. We had Audubon do a study of it, bird usage. We tried to keep it as tight as possible, but and I think we met with the agencies. I mean, part of it is you know, we've been in this game a long time. Stuart and myself, we were a lot younger when we started. So we built up, we're working with the agencies and people. So it does take a lot of back and forth. And we had to convince them that, look, there's actually a lot of mud habitat and actually not enough coarse-grained habitat, and that the conversion wasn't that much. So I don't have a formula. I think it'll be tougher at Paradise because eelgrass is a protected plant. But I think the hard part about it's really hard because if you go to Bothene Marsh, you know, some of the rare plants there are going to wash out on sea level rise. So on one hand, they're going to go away. On the other hand, if we try to do something, then we're prohibited from doing it because it might be an impact. So I think everybody's in this position now of trying to sort this out. So I don't have a formula. I will say that it will definitely be something that we would one would have to study and then put as many protective measures in as possible. Sometimes the grants have to include funds to maybe expand the eelgrass somewhere else. I don't know. But as for mudflat, we were able to convince them, and I'm happy to give you the study that we did that looked at that Audubon concluded it would not be detrimental to birds to do this conversion, at least out at Greenwood. I don't know if that helps or not. There is no formula. It's something we work through on every project, because, you know, doing something always probably has an impact to something. I mean, unless you can, you know, definitely just grade all the way back, and usually that's not really possible.
Okay, Jan and Bob Stevens have a question. They've been waiting patiently. So can you unmute them, Alan?
There you go. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes.
Can you hear? Yeah. First of all, I'd like to thank you very much for being here. You know, without people like you, we don't know what that it would look like. You know, we need people to shepherd the protection of our beautiful, beautiful area, and thank you for that. We live out, part of our question, I think, has already been answered by someone previously, but we live out near in the Peacock area ourselves, and where there's a lot of marshland out there by the quarry, etc. And you know, it's kind of looked lousy for a whole long time, and no birds, and you know. But I think someone mentioned earlier that it's private property. So maybe if it's private property, you can't do anything about it anyway. I don't know. But where the water comes from, etc.
Yeah, I don't know that. Stuart might. Private property definitely is harder. You need the landowner approval.
Yeah. It could be McNear's. I mean, I don't know who owns it.
In front of the Dutra.
Yeah, that's the Dutra quarry marshland, and we have been working with them at the coalition too. They do have a restoration project underway, but it has to do right now with just getting rid of the invasive species. And we have actually Stuart. I'll let Stuart talk to that because he's been working on an alternative restoration project. And if you'd like, could you share any information about that with us, Stuart?
Right. So kind of Roger alluded to it. There's really some tremendous potential there that is really worth taking a look at. That entire stretch, essentially from Main Drive on the west over to that little pocket beach on the east, and then including the quarry wetlands. The entire offshore of San Francisco Bay there is owned by Dutra. And it's remarkable the amount of private property in San Francisco Bay, and their land, what they can do with it is highly limited by a lot of, through a lot of mechanisms, so they can't go develop out there and this kind of stuff. But they're still privately owned, and so if you want to go do something, you have to have landowner permission. And so Dutra is not yet ready to have that piece of its property be looked at. So if they do get to that point, we have a lot of things we can do. So and kind of this ties right back to related to Kate's question as well, is that any sort of solution along there would involve some work out on the mudflats there. And Roger kind of mentioned, some things I've experienced elsewhere. So at a few places we've done projects that we've been allowed to do pretty small scale pilot, and they've all worked really well, and they've helped some of the agencies develop new policies to really allow this kind of work to happen more. But as Roger mentioned, we're in the probably most complex regulatory environment in the country, or one of them, and you've got 3 natural resources agencies and that follow state or federal laws. That this is a challenge Roger and I faced our whole careers. Those laws were written to, envisioning development and industry and stuff like that, not natural resource projects. And so like the Clean Water Act, there's some things that have more flexibility, but the state and federal endangered species acts and a lot of those kinds of laws don't. And it's really difficult to try to get those reopened either in Congress or the state legislature. Can be a Pandora's box. So there's room, things are changing, but it's not a simple lift. And then you add in private property and what are the interests of property owners on these kinds of things as well.
Thank you, Stuart. Alan Shavitz has a question.
Yeah, even if you can overcome the private property conundrum, isn't there an even bigger problem if you look, for instance, at that stretch along West San Pedro Road, where the road butts right up to riprap, which means there's no space to do any of the solutions that you proposed without filling in the bag. And that seems to be a big BCDC no-no. So how do you overcome that kind of limitation?
Well, they've changed their policies. So you can do bay fill in service of restoration. Because we did it at Rambrew. I mean, it showed you pictures. We put material in the bay. We may have been one of the first, I think, because you're right. But the BCDC, to their credit, is slowly acknowledging and understanding that adaptation, the bay is not getting smaller, it's actually getting bigger. And that they have to now figure out how to keep ecological value, prevent widespread flooding. So they have amended their bay fill policies, and we were on some of the tacks or twigs for that that's probably 4 or 5 years ago, I think. And they're still evaluating more ways to do that, I think, now. So there is no blanket prohibition. I mean, you can, if it's required for if it has a restoration component, you can put fill in the bay.
Okay, are there any other questions? I don't see any other questions. So I want to thank you so much, Roger, for such an informative and interesting evening. It really was I learned quite a bit. And I also want to thank Alan Shavitz very much, for our webmaster. He's always orchestrates our Zoom events so smoothly and skillfully, and but he's behind the scenes, so you don't really see him, and he needs to be, given his thanks. I also want to thank Wetlands Committee members who work really hard to realize these events. In this case, particularly Bonnie Mamor and Kathy Lentz did a lot to promote it. And also, I'd like to thank everybody who attended and participated and made this evening's event a success. So this presentation is recorded, and it will be up on our YouTube channel if you want to go and revisit it in a couple days. You can go to YouTube and just put in the Point San Pedro Road Coalition name, or you can just go to the coalition's website. It's very easy to find. There's a tab right on the menu bar. It says our YouTube channel. So you just click on that and you'll have access to the recordings of all of our previous presentation, wetlands and others. And then lastly, if you are inclined to donate, as I said, we are completely community funded. There is a donate tab on the menu bar as well, and all donations, big or small, are greatly appreciated. That's what helps us do what we do.